If projection is the way our shadow calls to us from across the street, pointing from the face of a stranger, then our triggers are the landmines. It is buried directly under the floorboards of our own home. Imagine walking through the familiar landscape of your own life, your daily interactions, your relationships, your work, and then suddenly, with no warning, a single word, a fleeting glance, a particular tone of voice causes a detonation. The ground gives way, a seismic charge of anger, or shame, or terror, or grief erupts from within, completely out of proportion to the event that caused it. The shrapnel of this emotional explosion is so powerful it can hijack your entire being, turning a calm afternoon into a raging battlefield, or a simple conversation into a pit of despair. You are left shaky, confused, and often filled with regret for your reaction. This is the experience of a trigger. These are the emotional landmines of the psyche. And they are not random hazards. They are perfectly placed, meticulously engineered signposts, acting as direct gateways into the heart of your personal shadow. The most profound and liberating truth you can understand about your triggers is this: the trigger is not the true cause of your pain. The person or situation that sets you off is not the source of the wound. They are merely the finger pressing upon a deep, pre-existing bruise you may not have even known was there. The pain was already present, dormant, a pocket of unresolved energy stored within your system. The trigger does not create the pain. It simply reveals it. When a casual remark about your work sends you into a spiral of worthlessness, the remark is not the origin of that feeling. It is simply the event that unlocked the door to a room deep inside you. A room already filled with the heavy air of inadequacy, perhaps built in childhood from the bricks of criticism or comparison. When your partner's need for space makes you feel a primal panic of abandonment, their request is not the cause of that terror. It is the key turning in a lock on a much older place through your res. Deeper fear. A fear that has been waiting in the dark for its moment to be seen. This is why the intensity of our reaction is the greatest clue. Every emotional response that feels vastly disproportionate to the present situation is a bright, flashing arrow, pointing not outward, at the person who made you feel something, but inward, directly toward a disowned belief, a forgotten memory, or a rejected aspect of yourself. The world is not attacking you. It is reflecting you. When you experience a 10-ton emotional reaction to a 1-ounce event, that is the shadow speaking. It is a message from your own unconscious, begging for your attention. The psyche is trying to heal itself, trying to bring a fragmented piece of you back into the light for integration. The more intense the trigger, the more vital the message. We spend so much of our lives trying to manage the external world, trying to avoid people and situations that press our buttons, creating elaborate systems to sidestep these emotional landmines. But this is a futile effort, like trying to level an entire city to avoid a few potholes. The true work, the alchemical work, is not to rearrange the world, but to bravely excavate the ground beneath your own feet. So how do you begin this excavation? You become a cartographer of your own inner world. You begin with gentle curiosity to map your personal triggers. Take out a metaphorical pen and paper and start to notice the patterns. What are the specific situations, the exact words, or the types of people that consistently provoke a powerful, gut-level reaction in you? Is it the feeling of being ignored? Perhaps when someone looks at their phone while you are speaking, you feel a surge of rage that feels far bigger than the moment calls for. Is it the feeling of being controlled? Maybe a simple suggestion from a loved one feels like a cage descending upon you, activating a desperate need to rebel and escape. Is it a sense of injustice? Do you find yourself consumed with righteous fury over small, everyday unfairnesses? Is it feeling unseen, unappreciated, disrespected, or abandoned? These are the major continents on the map of your shadow. Pay close attention. Don't judge what you find. Simply observe it. Notice the physical sensations that accompany the trigger. Does your chest tighten? Does heat rise in your face? Does your stomach clench? These are the somatic echoes of the original wound. This mapping is not an exercise in self-criticism. It is an act of profound self-awareness. You are gathering data, not building a case against yourself. You are becoming a detective of your own soul, searching for clues that lead back to the scene of the original crime. The moment a part of you was wounded, judged, and exiled into the shadows. Let me tell you a story about a man, a client, who was constantly tormented by a trigger related to being ignored. He was a successful executive, confident and composed on the surface. But if he was in a meeting, presenting an idea, and he noticed his boss glance away or check his watch, a switch would flip. A cold, hard rage would crystallize in his chest. He would feel his voice get tight, his arguments become defensive, and for the rest of the day, he would be consumed by an internal monologue of fury and resentment. Replaying the perceived slight over and over, the objective event was minor, a momentary lapse of attention. The subjective reaction was a Category 5 hurricane. Through our work together, he began to trace this trigger back. He used it as a thread and followed it down into the past. He remembered being a small boy, around 7 years old, excitedly trying to show his father a drawing he had made. His father, a busy and stressed man, barely looked up from his newspaper, murmuring a dismissive, "That's nice, son," without ever making eye contact. In that moment, the boy's vibrant, creative, attention-seeking self was met with a wall of indifference. A core belief was forged: what I have to offer is not important. I am not worth paying attention to. This belief, this wounded part of him, was banished to the shadow. Decades later, that same little boy was still living inside the executive, and whenever a situation mimicked that original wound, even slightly, the boy's unprocessed rage and hurt would erupt, using the full power of the adult man to express its pain. The boss was not the enemy. The boss was simply an actor on a stage, unknowingly playing a role that activated a ghost from the past. Seeing this connection changed everything for him. The trigger was no longer a mysterious attack. It became a signal, a heartbreakingly loyal messenger from a younger part of himself, crying out for the attention it never received. This is the crucial pivot point in this work. This is the moment you shift from automatic, unconscious reaction to deliberate, conscious response. A reaction is a reflex, a knee-jerk defense mechanism driven by the past. A response, however, is born in the present. It comes from a place of awareness. The space between the trigger and your reaction is where your power lies. For most, that space is infinitesimally small, a spark jumping a gap. But with practice, you can widen that space. In that space, you can take a breath. You can witness the emotion rising without becoming it. You can say to yourself, "Ah, there it is." The feeling of being ignored. The old story. You can feel the heat in your chest and simply observe it, without needing to aim it at someone. This is not about suppression. It is about compassionate observation. You are not stuffing the feeling back down into the darkness. You are allowing it to be in the light of your awareness. But you are refusing to let it take the driver's seat. You are transitioning from being a puppet jerked around by the strings of past wounds to being the conscious, compassionate witness of your own experience. You are using the trigger as an opportunity for profound inner listening. This courageous act of facing your triggers, of sitting in the fire of those uncomfortable emotions without immediately reacting, is the first true test of the alchemist. It requires a willingness to feel what you would rather avoid. It demands that you stop pointing the finger outward and instead turn your gaze inward, to the source of the heat, Recognizing your shadow through the mirrors of projection and the landmines of your triggers demands courage. It is the courage to begin the most necessary and transformative phase of this entire journey. The descent into the darkness. This work of mapping your triggers is not just an intellectual exercise. It is the conscious choice to step off the well-lit path of denial and into the shadowed forest of your own psyche. It is the preparation for the first great stage of the alchemical process. A stage known as the nigredo, the blackening, the dark night of the soul. The courage that allowed you to map your triggers and witness their detonation without flinching is the same courage required for the next step. But this step is different. It is a descent. This is the stage of the journey that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. It is the conscious decision to walk through the gates of the underworld of your own psyche. In the ancient tradition of alchemy, this foundational stage is known as the nigredo, a Latin term meaning the blackening. It is the putrefaction, the dissolution. The moment the alchemist places the raw material of their own soul into the crucible, seals it, and applies the fire of unflinching awareness, what happens next is not pretty. The material breaks down. It turns black. It becomes a chaotic, undifferentiated mass. It appears, to the untrained eye, to be utterly ruined. Let us be perfectly clear. The nigredo is not the same as clinical depression. Though it may share many of the same feelings, depression is often a passive state, a heavy fog that descends without invitation. Characterized by a numb and powerless inertia, the nigredo, while containing profound darkness and despair, is an active, sacred confrontation. It is a deliberate pilgrimage into the void. You are not falling into the abyss by accident. You are choosing to dive into it because you have a deep, intuitive sense that something vital has been lost there, something that can only be retrieved by going into the dark to find it. This is the hero's journey, not the victim's. It is the necessary process of dissolving the false self you have constructed, so that the true, golden self can eventually emerge. This dissolution is the central action of the nigredo. You must allow the person you thought you were to die. All of the carefully constructed pieces of your identity, the masks you wear for the world, the coping mechanisms you developed for survival, the rigid beliefs you inherited from your family and society. All of it must be subjected to the transformative fire. Your ego, that part of you that craves control, certainty, and approval, will fight this process with all its might. It will scream that you are failing, that you are losing your mind, that you are taking a terrible wrong turn. The feeling of being lost, of your life falling apart, is not a sign that the alchemy is failing. It is the primary sign that the alchemy is working. The old structure must crumble. The foundations must be turned to dust before anything new and authentic can be built in its place. During this time, you may feel an overwhelming sense of confusion and meaninglessness. The things that once brought you joy may feel hollow. Your ambitions may seem pointless. A profound emptiness might permeate your days. You might look at your life and feel like a stranger in it. This is the putrefaction. The universe is not punishing you. The universe is assisting you in a sacred demolition. It is helping you tear down a prison you mistook for a palace. It is pruning the dead branches, burning away the parts of your life, the relationships, the jobs, the beliefs that are not in alignment with your soul's deepest truth. It is a radical and often brutal act of grace. You are being cleared. You are being prepared for a more authentic existence. And that process requires a period of profound disorientation. You cannot find your true north until you have first accepted that you are completely and utterly lost. Perhaps the most powerful myth to illustrate this process is the ancient Sumerian story of Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, and her descent into the underworld. Inanna, at the height of her power, adorned with all her divine authority, makes the conscious choice to journey into the Kur, the land of no return, to visit her sister, Ereshkigal, the queen of the great below. Ereshkigal represents the ultimate, untamed shadow. To reach her, Inanna must pass through 7 gates. And at each gate, the gatekeeper demands she surrender one piece of her royal attire, one symbol of her power. At the first gate, she removes her crown, her connection to heaven. At the second, her lapis measuring rod in line, her sense of judgment and order. She sheds her necklaces, her breastplate, her golden ring, until at the 7th and final gate, she must remove her royal robe, the very fabric of her identity. She finally arrives before her sister, naked, stripped of all power, all status, all defense. She is nothing. And in that moment, the judges of the underworld pass sentence upon her. Ereshkigal fastens upon her the eye of death, speaks against her the word of wrath, and Inanna is turned into a corpse, a piece of rotting meat left to hang on a hook. This is the Nigredo in its most terrifying form, an absolute ego death, a complete surrender to the darkness, to the point of utter dissolution. The Queen of Heaven is dead, but the story does not end there. Because of her foresight, a plan is enacted in the world above, and eventually, life-giving water is brought down. She is revived, and she makes her ascent back through the 7 gates, reclaiming her power. But she is not the same. She has faced the ultimate darkness. She has integrated it, and she returns to the world, whole, transformed, and infinitely more powerful. For she now rules not just the heavens, but understands the depths as well. Your journey into the Nigredo is your own personal descent of Inanna. Each trigger you face, each painful truth you admit, each outdated belief you release, is the shedding of an adornment at one of the 7 gates. You are stripping away everything you are not, to discover what you truly are. You are letting your carefully constructed persona be turned into rotting meat on a hook, so that your true, eternal essence can be reborn. This requires unimaginable trust. Trust in the process. Trust that the darkness is not an endpoint, but a crucible. Trust that the feeling of falling apart is, in reality, the feeling of coming together. So how does one navigate this terrifying and sacred darkness? How do you endure the blackening without being consumed by it? The ego's response is to fight, to struggle, to try and claw its way back to the light with ferocious willpower. But this only prolongs the agony. You cannot fight your way out of the Nigredo. You cannot think your way out of it. The force that sees you through the dissolution, the hand that will eventually sprinkle the water of life upon you, is not one of brute strength or sharp intellect. It is a force that seems almost paradoxical in the face of such darkness. It is gentle. It is soft. It is warm. It is the radical, unconditional, and unwavering act of holding yourself with tenderness as you fall apart. It is the medicine of self-compassion. In the pitch-black crucible of the Nigredo, where all that you thought was solid has dissolved into chaos, there is only one source of light. It is not the glaring sun of positive thinking, nor the harsh spotlight of self-analysis. It is a soft, gentle, flickering flame, and it comes from a source you may have long since forgotten how to access. This is the flame of self-compassion. If you are to survive the descent and turn the lead of your darkness into gold, this compassion is not a sentimental luxury. It is the most essential, non-negotiable, and radical tool you possess. It is the vessel that will hold you as you break. It is the medicine that will soothe the burns of your own inner fire. Our society, a world built on achievement and relentless self-improvement, has taught us to confuse compassion with weakness. We mistake it for self-pity, for making excuses, for letting ourselves off the hook. But this is a profound misunderstanding. Self-pity is a state of passive victimhood. It looks outward and says, "Poor me. Look what the world has done to me. It marinates in its own powerlessness. Self-compassion, however, is an act of courageous presence. It looks inward and says, "This pain is real. This suffering is valid. And I will stay here with myself through it." Self-pity drowns you in the story of your wound. Self-compassion acknowledges the wound and then tenderly begins to clean it. It is the difference between collapsing in the rain and choosing to hold an umbrella over your own head. It is an act of profound strength and self-responsibility. The shadow does not need your judgment. It has already been judged. By you and by the world. 1,000 times over. That judgment is what created it. Your anger, your jealousy, your fear, your shame. These parts of you do not need more criticism to be healed. They need your understanding. They need your witness. The great secret of shadow work is that every monstrous behavior, every self-sabotaging impulse, originates from a place of pain. It is a distorted survival strategy. The inner critic that relentlessly tells you you're not good enough is actually a terrified part of you, desperately trying to protect you from the potential shame of external criticism by criticizing you first. The saboteur who makes you procrastinate on your greatest dream is often a part of you that is trying to shield you from the devastating pain of potential failure. These are not villains to be slain. They are terrified children in monster costumes. Compassion is the act of looking past the scary mask and speaking directly to the frightened child underneath. To heal, you must learn to change the very tone of your inner world. For most of us, the voice in our head is a harsh taskmaster, a relentless drill sergeant. It says things like, "Why did you do that? You idiot, you always mess this up. You should be over this by now. No one will ever love you if you act like that." Now, imagine for a moment that your dearest friend, or a small child you love, came to you in tears, having made the exact same mistake you just made. Would you speak to them with that same voice? Of course not. You would soften. You would say, "Hey, it's okay. It was a mistake. You're human. This is so hard. I'm so sorry you're hurting. You are trying your best." And that is enough. The radical act of self-compassion is to begin, deliberately and consistently, to offer that same gentle, reassuring voice to yourself. It is to become your own loving parent, your own best friend, your own safe harbor. When you feel the sting of shame, instead of piling on more judgment, you can learn to place a hand on your own heart and whisper, "Of course this feels shameful. This is a painful feeling. I am here. I am not leaving." This practice is what breaks the vicious cycle of shame and self-punishment. The cycle works like this: a shadow aspect acts out, causing you to say or do something you regret. This triggers a wave of shame. In response to the shame, your inner critic attacks you, punishing you for being bad. This self-flagellation deepens the wound and reinforces the core belief that you are fundamentally flawed, which, in turn, makes it even more likely that the shadow will act out again in the future to escape the pain. It is a self-perpetuating prison of suffering. Compassion is the key that unlocks the cell door. When you meet the initial act with compassion instead of condemnation, the cycle shatters. You are communicating a new message to the deepest parts of your being. You are not bad for feeling this way. Your actions might have been misguided, but your pain is valid. You are worthy of love and kindness, especially now. This creates an inner environment of safety, and only in safety can true, lasting change occur. Wounded parts of you will not emerge from the shadows into a war zone. They will only emerge into an atmosphere of unconditional welcome. There is a powerful story from the Buddhist tradition that perfectly illustrates this principle. It is the story of a ruthless murderer named Angulimala, whose name meant garland of fingers, for he wore a necklace made from the fingers of his many victims. He was the embodiment of the terrifying, destructive shadow, a man considered beyond redemption. One day, the Buddha was walking peacefully near Angulimala's forest. Against all advice, The Buddha entered the forest, and Angulimala, seeing him, began to chase him, intent on making him his next victim. But a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was walking calmly, Angulimala could not catch up to him. Exasperated, he yelled, "Stop, monk!" The Buddha turned and replied with perfect calm, "I have stopped. Angulimala, it is you who have not stopped." He was speaking of a deeper truth. The Buddha had stopped the cycle of hatred, violence, and reactivity within himself. Angulimala was still running, trapped on the endless wheel of his own rage and suffering. Stunned by this response, Angulimala stood frozen. For the first time in his life, he was met not with fear, not with hatred, not with violence, but with a presence of absolute, unwavering, unconditional compassion. The Buddha did not judge him. He did not condemn him. He simply saw him in his entirety and held that space with love. In the face of this radical compassion, Angulimala's entire being shattered. The hardened shell of the murderer cracked open, and he fell to his knees, weeping. He was not transformed by punishment, but by an acceptance so profound it broke through all of his defenses. He went on to become a devoted monk. His life, a testament to the fact that no shadow is so dark that it cannot be transformed by the light of compassion. You must become the Buddha to your own Angulimala. You must meet your own inner killer, your own inner thief, your own inner saboteur, not with a sword, but with an open heart. You must be the one who finally stops running, who turns to face the terrifying parts of yourself and says, "I have stopped. I will not fight you anymore. I am here to understand." This is the great work. It is the alchemy that turns the poison of self-hatred into the nectar of self-acceptance. It is this foundation of safety, this unwavering compassionate presence, that creates the sacred container necessary for the next phase of our journey. Now that the battlefield has been consecrated into a sanctuary, we can finally do something that was impossible before. We can invite the shadows to step out of the darkness, not to be judged or exiled, but to finally speak. We can begin a direct dialogue with the lost parts of our soul, with the warm, unwavering light of compassion now lit in the center of your inner world. The landscape is no longer a battlefield. It has become a sanctuary. Having established this sacred truce, you have earned the trust of the very parts of yourself you once feared. Now, and only now, are you ready to move from passive observation to active engagement? You are ready to do more than just listen for the echoes of the shadow. You are ready to invite it into a direct conversation. For this, we turn to one of the most profound and powerful tools of depth psychology, a practice developed by the great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, called active imagination. This is not daydreaming. In a daydream, your ego is the scriptwriter, director, and star of the show, creating fantasies that serve its own desires. Active imagination is a partnership. It is a structured form of waking meditation where you consciously invite an image from the unconscious to arise, and then you engage with it, not as its creator, but as an equal participant in a dialogue. You are opening a channel, becoming an ambassador to the autonomous, living figures that reside in the inner world of your psyche. You are giving a voice and a form to the very feelings and impulses that have been governing you from the shadows. It is the art of making the unconscious conscious through a living, breathing dialogue. The process is more straightforward than it sounds, though it requires patience and a willingness to be surprised. The first step is to create a sacred and protected space, both externally and internally. Find a time and place where you will not be disturbed for at least 15 to 30 minutes. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and take several deep, calming breaths. This signals to your entire system that you are shifting from the outer world to the inner world. Set a clear intention. You are not there to conquer or command, but to listen and to learn. You are entering this inner space as a diplomat, not a soldier. The second step is the invitation. Bring to mind a specific shadow aspect you wish to understand. Perhaps it is the inner critic you have become so familiar with, the loadings braided solve. Perhaps it is the heavy feeling of anxiety that sits in your chest. Or maybe it is the self-saboteur that pulls the rug out from under you whenever you get close to success. Choose one. Then, hold the feeling or the idea of this part of you in your mind and ask it to take a form. Give it permission to show itself to you as a person, an animal, a mythical creature, or even an object. Be patient and do not force it. Simply hold the question. What do you look like? And wait for an image to emerge from the darkness of your mind's eye. It might be vivid and clear, or it might be faint and hazy. Trust whatever comes. Once the figure has appeared, you begin the third and most crucial step, the dialogue. Remember your compassionate stance. You are speaking to a wounded part of yourself. You might begin by simply asking, "Who are you?" or "What is your name?" Then you listen for the answer. The answer may come as words in your mind, as a feeling, or as another image. Your job is to stay present and ask the next question. The goal here is not to win an argument or to banish the figure. The goal is to understand its world. Ask it questions like, "What do you want from me? What are you afraid will happen? What do you need from me? Why do you do what you do?" You must approach this with genuine curiosity, giving the figure the respect you would give to any sovereign being. You must listen to its answers, even if they are angry, irrational, or painful to hear. This is its truth, and it is a piece of your truth. This leads to the fourth principle. Your aim is relationship, not resolution. You are not trying to get your inner critic to shut up. You are trying to understand its job. You are not trying to kill the monster of your anxiety. You are trying to find out what it is guarding. This shift in intention is everything. When these shadow parts feel genuinely heard and respected, for perhaps the first time in their existence, they begin to transform. Their defenses soften, their motivations become clear, and their raw energy becomes available to you in a new, more constructive way. Let me share an example. A woman I worked with was plagued by a relentless, paralyzing anxiety whenever she considered taking a creative risk. Like sharing her writing, it was a formless, suffocating dread that kept her small and safe. In an active imagination session, she invited this anxiety to take a form. What appeared was a man, pale and gaunt, dressed in a heavy, ill-fitting suit of medieval armor. He was inside a small, windowless stone room, and he was frantically, obsessively, checking the multiple locks on the single wooden door. She began the dialogue. "Who are you?" she asked. From inside the helmet, a muffled, fearful voice replied, "I am the guard." "What are you guarding?" she asked. "I'm guarding you," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm keeping you safe." "Safe from what?" "From them," he whispered. "From the laughter, from the pointing fingers. Don't you remember?" And in a flash, she did remember. She was transported to a memory from 3rd grade, when she had proudly read a poem she had written to the class, only to be met with laughter and ridicule from a group of classmates. The shame was so intense, so searing, that a part of her had fractured off, donned a suit of armor, and vowed, "Never again. I will never let us be that vulnerable again." Her anxiety was not an enemy. It was a loyal, traumatized, 8-year-old security guard, still on duty 30 years later, protecting her from a threat that had long since passed. He was using an outdated strategy that was now suffocating her life. Tears streamed down her face. She looked at this armored figure with a wave of compassion so profound it felt like a physical force. She did not try to break down the door or strip him of his armor. She simply spoke to him from her heart. "Thank you," She said, "You have done an incredible job. You have kept me safe for so long. But I'm grown up now. I can handle it. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Your watch is over." She then offered him a new role, not as a jailer, but as a discerning advisor. A part of her she could consult, whose wisdom she could value, but who no longer had ultimate control over the door to her life. The figure of the guard didn't vanish. He simply relaxed. The oppressive feeling of anxiety began to transform into a more manageable energy of gentle caution. This is the power of this work. Finally, the last step is to document the journey. As soon as you finish your session, write down the entire dialogue in a journal. Write down what the figures looked like, what they said, and how you felt. This act anchors the experience in your conscious reality. It honors the messages from your unconscious and allows you to track the evolution of these inner relationships over time. These dialogues are letters from the lost country of your own soul. You must treat them as precious documents. This practice of waking dialogue is a potent way to build a bridge to your shadow. But your unconscious does not only speak when you formally invite it to. It has its own rhythm, its own theater, and its own schedule. It sends you messages every single night, communicating in its native tongue, a language not of words, but of symbols, stories, and archetypes. This is the language of dreams, and learning to decode these nightly messages is the next great adventure in our alchemical journey. While active imagination is our deliberate, conscious effort to build a bridge into the unconscious, the unconscious itself has its own method of reaching out to us. It does not wait for an invitation. Every night, without fail, after you surrender your conscious mind to sleep, the curtains rise on a private, nightly theater of the soul. This is the world of dreams, the great alchemist of the psyche. Carl Jung called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. For in this state, the ego's vigilant guard is lowered, and the shadow is free to express itself without censorship. It speaks in its native tongue, a primordial language of symbols, metaphors, and feelings. To learn to understand your dreams is to learn to read the nightly letters sent to you from the deepest, wisest part of yourself. The first principle to grasp is that dreams are often compensatory. The psyche, like the body, constantly seeks balance or homeostasis. Your dreams will therefore bring you the very things that are missing from your conscious life. If your waking life is overly intellectual, rigid, and controlled, your dreams may be filled with wild, chaotic, emotional, and instinctual events. They are providing the missing counterbalance. If you are consciously suppressing deep sadness, you may dream of floods, rain, or deep oceans. As the psyche attempts to release this pent-up emotional water, if you insist on a persona of absolute niceness and deny your own anger, you might dream of raging fires, volcanoes, or you may even be a violent aggressor in the dream yourself. The dream is not encouraging you to be violent. It is holding up a mirror to the powerful, fiery energy you are refusing to acknowledge in your waking hours. Your dreams are your soul's loyal opposition, faithfully presenting the other side of the story to prevent you from becoming dangerously one-sided. Because dreams speak this symbolic language, our first temptation is to reach for a dream dictionary, to look up the meaning of a snake or a falling tooth. This is the single biggest mistake you can make in dream work. A dream symbol is not a word with a universal definition. It is a deeply personal image, saturated with your own unique life experiences, memories, and emotions. A snake to a biologist who studies reptiles is a symbol of fascination and science. A snake to someone who grew up in a fundamentalist religion might be a symbol of temptation and evil. A snake to someone who has just recovered from a serious illness might be a symbol of healing and transformation. Echoing the rod of Asclepius used as a symbol of medicine, a dream dictionary can never know which of these is true for you. You are the only living expert on the meaning of your own dreams. The dream is from your psyche. Therefore, the meaning is within your psyche as well. So how do you begin to approach this sacred nightly text? You become a gentle and curious student of your own symbolic vocabulary. The work begins the moment you wake up, before you move, before you check your phone, before the logic of the day rushes in and washes it away. Lie still and catch the residue of the dream. Keep a journal and pen by your bed, and write down everything you can remember. Immediately. Do not censor or edit. Write down the bizarre, the nonsensical, the seemingly irrelevant details, the color of a character's shoes, the strange weather, the feeling of the light in the room. These details are often where the richest meaning is hidden. Write in the present tense, as if it is happening now, to recapture the immediacy of the experience. Once you have captured the narrative, turn your attention to the feeling. How did your dreamy go? The you and the dream. Feel. Were you terrified, joyful, confused, angry, or calm? The emotional tone of the dream is one of the most direct clues to its message. Then, you begin the alchemical work of questioning. Look at every major person, animal, and object in the dream, and ask the single most important question in all of dream work. What part of me does this character or symbol represent? If you dream of a harsh and critical judge, what part of you is that inner judge? If you dream of a frightened, abandoned child, where does that frightened child live inside of you? If you dream of a crumbling house, what inner structure, what belief system in your life is currently falling apart? By seeing every element as an aspect of yourself, the dream transforms from a random story into an exquisitely detailed map of your own inner landscape. This brings us to the most potent of all dreams, the recurring dream, a dream that repeats itself, whether it's once a week or once a decade, is a message from the unconscious that is so urgent, so vital to your well-being, that it will not be ignored. It will keep knocking on the door of your consciousness until you finally answer. One of the most common recurring dreams is the chase dream. You are running, panicked, from a terrifying monster, a shadowy figure, or a menacing threat. Your legs feel like lead. You can't scream, and the pursuer is getting closer and closer. The conventional interpretation is that you are running from a problem in your life. But from a shadow work perspective, the question is far deeper. What if the thing that is chasing you is not trying to harm you, but is desperately trying to connect with you? What if that terrifying monster is a disowned part of your own power? What if the shadowy figure is your own repressed creativity, your unexpressed anger, your dormant leadership, trying to catch up to you to deliver a gift? You have exiled this powerful energy to the shadow, and now it wants to come home. It is chasing you because you are running from your own potential, from your own wholeness. The alchemical instruction for the chase dream is therefore a radical act of courage. The next time it happens, or even now, in your active imagination, you must stop running. You must turn around. You must face the monster. Stand your ground. Breathe. And ask it directly. What do you want from me? What gift are you bringing me? This act of turning to face the fear often transforms the dream itself. The monster may stop and speak. It may transform into something else entirely. It might even hand you something. By turning to face it, you are signaling to your psyche that you are ready to integrate this lost piece of yourself. You are ending the inner civil war and beginning the process of making peace. When you begin to listen to your shadow in these ways, through conscious dialogue and the decoding of your nightly dreams, a remarkable thing begins to happen. You don't just unearth problems, wounds, and monsters that need to be healed. As you excavate the dark soil of your psyche, you begin to find that not everything buried there is dark. You start to hit veins of something else, something that glitters, something that shines with an intense and beautiful light. You realize that you have not only banished your demons to the shadow, You have also banished your gods. This is the discovery of the hidden treasure of the shadow. The gold that has been waiting for you all along. As you courageously continue your descent into the inner world, guided by the light of compassion and the maps of your dreams, you will inevitably make the most stunning discovery of this entire journey. You will find that the shadow is not just a dungeon for your demons, a repository for your pain and your shame. It is also a vault, and within this vault lies a treasure of unimaginable value. A treasure that belongs to you and you alone. You will discover that at some point in your life, for reasons you are only now beginning to understand, you did not only banish what you deemed ugly and unacceptable about yourself, you also banished what was most beautiful, most powerful, and most brilliant. This is the great, joyful secret of this work, the discovery of what is known as the Golden Shadow. The Golden Shadow is the home of your exiled magnificence. It is the repository of all the positive, potent, and luminous qualities that you could not, or would not, own in yourself. Why would anyone disown their own gold? The reasons are as complex as we are. Perhaps you grew up in a family or culture where standing out was seen as arrogant or dangerous. You learned the lesson, don't shine too brightly, or you will be cut down. Perhaps you were taught that being powerful, confident, or brilliant was not humble, not feminine, not spiritual. Perhaps owning your true potential felt like too great a responsibility, the weight of it too heavy to bear. Or perhaps, most commonly, you carry a core wound of unworthiness that simply cannot believe such radiant qualities could possibly belong to you. And so, you projected them outward, giving them away to others, and convincing yourself that they could only exist outside of you. The mechanism for discovering your golden shadow is the same one that revealed your darker aspects, but in reverse. It is the mechanism of projection. Just as you project your unowned darkness onto the people who irritate and repel you, as you project your unowned light onto the people you admire, idolize, and worship, that intense, almost obsessive admiration you feel for a particular artist, leader, innovator, or even a fictional hero, is not just a passive appreciation. It is a homing beacon. It is your own soul, recognizing a lost part of itself and calling out to it across the distance. The very qualities that you are mesmerized by in others are the dormant qualities waiting to be awakened within you. Your envy, when stripped of its competitive bitterness, is a sacred clue. Your profound admiration is a map. The people you idolize are living, breathing mirrors of your own hidden potential. Are you captivated by someone's effortless confidence and their ability to command a room? That is your own latent confidence, your own dormant leadership, waving to you from across the theater, begging to be invited onto the stage of your life. Are you moved to tears by a singer's voice or a painter's canvas? That is your own inner artist, your own creative wellspring, weeping because it has been blocked from its natural expression. Do you feel a thrill of awe when you see someone speak their truth with fearless courage? That is your own inner warrior, your own advocate for justice, rattling its cage, desperate to be unleashed for a cause that matters to you. I want you to try an exercise. Take a moment to list 3 to 5 people whom you deeply admire. They can be living or dead, famous or people you know personally. Now, next to each name, write down the specific qualities that you are most drawn to in them. Is it their wit, their resilience, their rebellious spirit, their profound compassion, their entrepreneurial genius? Now, look at that list of qualities. Read it aloud. The great revelation is this: that list is not a description of them. It is a self-portrait of your own golden shadow. That is the undiscovered continent within you. That is the treasure map to your own soul. Let me tell you about a man named James. James was a brilliant data analyst, highly respected for his meticulous work. But he was quiet, unassuming, and professionally invisible. He felt a deep, secret shame about his inability to articulate his ideas with force and charisma. He would spend hours watching TED Talks or interviews with dynamic, eloquent leaders, feeling a painful mix of intense admiration and hopeless longing. He was projecting his golden shadow onto them. He believed that charisma was a magical quality they possessed and he completely lacked. Through this work, he came to understand that his intense fascination was a clue. It was a signpost pointing to a disowned part of himself. Terrified, but spurred on by this new awareness, he took a radical step. He joined a local storytelling club. His first few attempts were awkward and nerve-wracking. He tried to emulate the booming, polished style of the speakers he admired, and it felt hollow and inauthentic. He nearly quit. But then, he remembered the principle of authenticity. He decided to stop trying to be them and just be himself. One evening, instead of presenting a powerful idea, he simply told a quiet, personal story about a lesson he had learned from his grandfather. He spoke without pretense, with genuine feeling and vulnerability, and the room went silent, completely captivated. What he discovered was that his golden shadow wasn't charisma as he had defined it. He wasn't the flashy, extroverted orator. His gold was something far more unique and authentic. It was a gift for quiet, compelling, heartfelt connection. It was the power of understated sincerity. He didn't become his idols. He became a fuller, more expressed version of James. By owning his gold, he didn't just become a better speaker. He became more himself. Identifying your gold is the first step. The second, more courageous step, is to begin to mine it. You must own it through action. This doesn't mean you quit your job tomorrow to become a rock star. It means you take small, manageable, low-stakes risks to begin embodying these qualities. If you admire courage, your task might be to voice a dissenting opinion in one low-risk meeting. If you admire creativity, your task is to buy a small set of watercolors and spend 30 minutes playing with them, with no expectation of creating a masterpiece. If you admire connection, your task is to have one conversation where you are more present and vulnerable than usual. You are creating small-scale experiments to prove to your psyche that it is safe to shine. You are slowly, gently, coaxing your own brilliance out of exile. This is the great turning point in the alchemical process. We have descended into the darkness to face our demons, and we have reached through the darkness to reclaim our gold. We have begun the sacred process of bringing together all that we have rejected, both light and dark. What happens now? When these two powerful, opposing streams are brought together within the crucible of a single human heart. What is forged when the lead of your pain is combined with the gold of your potential? What emerges is something new. It is a substance of incredible strength and flexibility. It is the creation of an unshakable inner core, a profound emotional resilience. This is the forging of the legendary philosopher's stone within your own soul. When the raw, dark ore of your pain is brought into the same crucible as the radiant, shining gold of your potential, and the steady fire of compassionate awareness is applied, a profound synthesis occurs. The dark and the light do not cancel each other out. They merge. This is the great secret of alchemy. The goal is not to purify the lead away from the gold, but to create a new substance altogether, an alloy that contains the properties of both, but is stronger and more valuable than either alone. This new substance, forged in the heart of your own experience, is the legendary philosopher's stone of the psyche. It is the indestructible core of true emotional resilience. This resilience is not what our culture has taught you to believe. It is not a rigid armor that prevents you from feeling pain. It is not a stoic refusal to be affected by the world. That is brittleness. And what is brittle shatters under pressure. True resilience is the opposite. It is a profound flexibility, a deep and expansive capacity to feel the entirety of the human experience, the full spectrum of emotion, without being destroyed by it. It is the ability to be with joy, with grief, with terror, with rage, with peace, and to remain centered in the midst of it all. You no longer live in fear of your own inner weather. You become the calm, deep ocean that can hold any storm that passes across its surface. This is possible because you have fundamentally changed your relationship with your emotions. They are no longer enemies to be suppressed or problems to be solved. By courageously facing them through your shadow work, you have discovered their hidden intelligence. Each emotion is now a trusted advisor, a valuable tool in the art of living. Your anger, once a source of destructive rage or bitter resentment, is now recognized as the clean, sacred fire of your life force. It is the energy that allows you to set firm boundaries, to protect what you love, to say no with clarity and integrity, and to move powerfully in the direction of your purpose. It is no longer a wildfire, it is a focused, cutting torch. Your sadness, which you may have once feared as a bottomless pit of despair, is now a gateway to connection. By allowing yourself to feel your own sorrow, you have opened the channels of empathy. You can now sit with the sorrow of others without needing to fix it, because you are no longer terrified of its echo within yourself. Your grief becomes the rich, dark soil from which compassion and a profound appreciation for the beauty of impermanence can grow. Your fear is no longer a cage that keeps you small. It is a wise and ancient messenger, a signal from your intuition that something requires your attention. It prompts you to prepare, to be mindful, to respect real dangers. But it no longer holds a veto over the decisions of your soul. You learn to let fear ride in the passenger seat. You can hear its advice, but it is no longer allowed to grab the steering wheel. Do you understand the immense power of this transformation? For your entire life, a vast portion of your vital energy has been consumed by a single, exhausting task: the suppression of your shadow. Think of the monumental effort it took to keep the masks in place, to police your own thoughts, to manage the people and situations that might trigger you, to constantly run from your own feelings. It is the equivalent of running a massive, energy-draining surveillance program on yourself, 24 hours a day. By making peace with your shadow, you are shutting that program down, and all of that energy, that immense reservoir of life force, is now liberated. It is returned to you, a tidal wave of creative potential that you can now invest in building the life you truly desire, in loving more deeply, in being more present, in creating, serving, and experiencing the world with a richness you never thought possible. The inner war is over, and you are now free to use the spoils for creation instead of defense. The ultimate result is that you become a strong container. Imagine a fragile ceramic vase. Even a small amount of boiling water or freezing liquid could cause it to crack. But through the alchemical fire of this work, you are no longer a fragile vase. You have been reforged into a deep, iron cauldron. You can hold the boiling rage and the freezing despair. You can contain the tension of the opposites, your strength and your vulnerability, your joy and your sorrow, in your divine nature and your messy humanity, and you do not break. You have the capacity to hold it all. Think of an ancient oak tree in the midst of a violent storm. The wind howls, bending its branches to impossible angles. A rigid, brittle tree would fight the wind, and its trunk would snap. But the oak tree's strength is in its yielding. It bends. It flows with the force that is moving through it. But it does not break. And why? Because its resilience does not come from its resistance to the storm above, but from the depth and breadth of its root system below. In the darkness of the earth, the deeper its roots have traveled into the unseen, into the soil of its own history, the more grounded it is. Those roots, intertwined with the dirt, the decay, the minerals, the darkness, that is the tree's integrated shadow. Its ability to dance with the storm in the light is directly proportional to its connection with the darkness below. You, too. I learned to draw strength from the very things you once tried to ignore. Your wounds become your roots, grounding you in a foundation of unshakable reality. This forged, embodied resilience now becomes the platform for your life. When you are no longer expending your energy on inner warfare, and you are no longer terrified of the full range of your own feelings, an incredible sense of freedom arises. You no longer need to constantly curate your personality to gain approval or avoid disapproval. The desperate need for external validation falls away, because you have cultivated an unshakable source of validation within yourself. This solid inner ground gives you the footing to take the next, most courageous step of all to show up in the world, in your relationships, and in your life, as you truly are. This is the foundation for a life of radical authenticity. The profound, unshakable resilience you have forged within yourself is not for passive endurance. It is for active living. It is the solid ground upon which you can now build a life of staggering, unapologetic authenticity. For your entire life, you have been taught a subtle and devastating form of self-betrayal. You have learned to sand down your sharp edges, to soften your bold opinions, to swallow your truth in order to be more palatable, more agreeable, more acceptable to the people around you. Every time you have said yes when your soul screamed no, every time you have laughed at a joke that violated your values, every time you have silenced your own inner knowing to keep the peace, you have cut a small piece of your soul away. You believed this was the price of admission for belonging, for love, for safety. Now, you are about to learn that the price was far too high, and the thing you were trying to buy was never truly for sale. To live authentically is to embark on the most courageous act of all, the courage to be disliked. This is the radical principle, drawn from the deep wisdom of Adlerian psychology, that will shatter the foundations of your old life. For as long as you can remember, you have been operating under the assumption that your worth is determined by the approval of others. You have lived like an actor on a stage, constantly scanning the audience, adjusting your performance based on their applause, their yawns, their frowns. To be authentic is to walk off that stage, turn your back on the audience, and begin a journey guided not by their reactions, but by the unwavering compass of your own heart. It is the realization that other people's opinion of you is none of your business. Their thoughts, their feelings, their judgments belong to them. Your life belongs to you. To try and control what they think is to abandon your own life to live inside theirs. A futile and exhausting endeavor. When you begin to integrate your shadow, you no longer need the world to validate you, because you are no longer hiding from yourself. You have faced your own darkness and discovered your own gold. The desperate need for external approval, which is the engine of all people-pleasing, simply runs out of fuel. You stop editing yourself. You start speaking your truth. Not with aggression, but with clarity. You start making choices based on your own values, not on the expectations of your parents, your partner, or your peers. And as you do this, a fascinating and terrifying thing will begin to happen. Your relationships will recalibrate. Think of your authentic self as emitting a clear, powerful frequency. When you were living inauthentically, your signal was fuzzy, distorted, designed to please everyone, and therefore truly resonating with no one. As you become more authentic, your signal becomes crystal clear, and like a divine tuning fork, it will begin to attract the very people who resonate with that true frequency. The people who are meant for you, the ones who love the real you, will be drawn closer. They will feel a sense of relief and excitement, as if they are finally meeting the person they always knew was there. Simultaneously, the people who were only in relationship with your mask, the ones who benefited from your lack of boundaries and your pleasing persona, will become uncomfortable. Your newfound authenticity will feel like a threat to them. They may call you selfish. They may say you've changed. They may try to guilt you back into your old, smaller shape, and some of them will fall away. Let them. Their departure is not a sign of your failure. It is a sign of your success. Your life is not a stage for an unlimited audience. It is a sacred space with limited capacity. Your authenticity is the holy filter that ensures only those who are meant to be in that space are invited in. It is not a loss. It is a profound and necessary clarification. But this process requires you to walk directly through the heart of your deepest, most primal fear, the fear of rejection. As a social species, our brains are hardwired to believe that ostracism means death. When you first begin to set boundaries, to speak your truth, to be disliked, your nervous system will sound every alarm it has. You will feel the sickening anxiety that comes when you know someone is upset with you. You will feel the tidal wave of guilt that follows a firm no. You will feel the terror of being misunderstood or judged. In the past, you would have treated this fear as a stop sign, a signal that you had gone too far and needed to retreat. Apologize and make yourself small again. Now, you must learn to see this fear in a new light. It is not a stop sign. It is a confirmation. It is the screaming protest of your ego as you dismantle the prison it built to keep you safe. It is the withdrawal symptom from a lifelong addiction to approval. Your task is to feel this fear, to honor its ancient roots, but to not let it make your decisions. You must breathe through it. Hold yourself with the compassion you have learned, and keep walking in the direction of your own truth. The peace you are seeking is not on the side of universal approval, but on the other side of your fear of disapproval. There is a profound freedom in this. Imagine no longer having to calculate the impact of every word. Imagine no longer feeling responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. Imagine making a decision and only having to consult one authority, the deep, inner knowing within yourself. This is the peace that comes from living in alignment with your own values. It is a quiet, solid, and unshakable peace, for it is generated from within, and no external opinion can touch it. You finally understand that you can be a good, kind, and loving person, and still have people who do not like you or approve of your choices. And that is perfectly okay. You have released the world from the impossible burden of validating you, and you have released yourself from the impossible burden of pleasing the world. When you reclaim all of the energy you once poured into performance, into managing perceptions, into worrying about the audience, that energy has to go somewhere. It is a massive current of life force that has been dammed up your entire life. Authenticity is the act of breaking that dam. This liberated energy does not just create a state of peace, it becomes a dynamic, generative, and untamed force. It is the raw material of creation itself. By daring to live truthfully, you have not just found peace of mind. You have unwittingly unlocked the very wellspring of your own creativity. The dam of inauthenticity has broken. The vast, pent-up energy you once used for self-suppression and performance has been liberated. This energy does not simply create a quiet lake of peace. It forms a powerful, surging river. And this river has a name. It is creativity. This is your human birthright. The wellspring that lies at the core of every soul, waiting to be unblocked. And the great secret is that the source of this wellspring, the very place from which it draws its inexhaustible power, is the dark, fertile, and mysterious ground of the shadow itself. First, we must shatter the illusion that creativity belongs only to a select few: the painters, the poets, the musicians. This is a lie that keeps most of humanity from accessing their most potent gift. Creativity, in its purest form, is not about art. It is the act of bringing something new into existence. It is the force that solves a complex problem in a novel way. It is the inspiration that rearranges a room to create a new feeling. It is the spark that guides a parent to connect with their child in a way they never have before. It is the energy that transforms a handful of simple ingredients into a nourishing meal. It is the fundamental impulse to make, to innovate, to express, to bring form to the formless, and to do this in a way that is truly original. You must have access to the full palette of human experience. especially the colors that have been hidden in the dark. Our conscious minds, our egos, prefer things that are neat, orderly, and socially acceptable. But true, groundbreaking creativity is rarely polite. It is born in the messy, chaotic, and often forbidden territories of the soul. The greatest art, the most moving music, the literature that changes our lives, does not spring from a place of simple happiness or contentment. It arises from the raw, untamed landscape of the shadow. It is a testament to the artist's courage to explore the unlit corners of human experience. Your pain is not an obstacle to your creativity. It is a source of pigment. Your rage is not the enemy of your expression. It is the chisel that carves with precision and power. Your longing, your melancholy, your terror, these are not flaws in your character. They are the notes of a deep and resonant chord. The integration of your shadow is the ultimate catalyst for this creative flow. By embracing what you once disowned, you have fundamentally broken the rules of your own inner society. You have dared to feel what was forbidden. This act of inner rebellion naturally overflows into your outer world. You are no longer bound by conventional thinking because you have dissolved the inner conventions that kept you small. You can see the world in new and startling ways because you have embraced the strange and startling parts of yourself. You can connect seemingly disparate ideas because you have woven together the most disparate parts of your own psyche, the light and the dark, the sacred and the profane, the masculine and the feminine. You have become a living embodiment of paradox. And from that tension, true originality is born. Look to the lives of the artists we revere as saints of this process. Look at Frida Kahlo. Her life was a canvas of immense pain, a body shattered in a horrific accident, a heart broken repeatedly in a tumultuous and passionate love. She did not create her art despite her pain. She dipped her brush directly into the wound. Her art is a raw, unflinching, and surreal exploration of her own body, her own suffering, her own resilience. She painted her broken spine as a fractured column, her heart exposed and bleeding, her body pierced by nails. She took her deepest shadow, her physical and emotional agony, and made it visible, made it iconic, made it immortal. She did not flinch from the darkness. She made it her most intimate subject, and, in doing so, transformed it into breathtaking beauty. Or look at Vincent van Gogh, a man who lived in the throes of profound mental anguish and crushing loneliness. He was the ultimate outsider, his spirit too intense for the world around him. And where did that torment go? It was alchemized onto the canvas. The swirling, ecstatic, almost violent energy of his inner world became the starry night. The desperate, burning intensity of his longing for life and connection became the vibrant, explosive life force of his sunflowers. He did not paint calm, pastoral scenes. He painted the raw, throbbing, and sometimes terrifying energy of his own soul. We revere these artists not because they were perfect, well-adjusted people, but because they were courageous enough to give form to their chaos. They did not hide their shadow, they gave it to the world as a gift. This same wellspring exists within you. You do not need a life of dramatic tragedy to access it. You need only the courage to be honest about the inner life you are already living. Your creativity is waiting for you to give it an outlet, a voice, a form of expression. This is not about producing a masterpiece. It is about the sacred practice of externalizing your internal world. Without judgment, buy a cheap notebook and start journaling, letting your thoughts flow without censorship. Get a block of clay and let your hands shape the feeling of your anger or your joy. Put on music and dance in your living room, allowing your body to express the emotions that have no words. This is not for an audience. It is for you. It is the act of giving your shadow a constructive and beautiful place to speak, rather than letting it build up pressure and explode in destructive ways. This journey of creative self-expression, this act of living from a place of authenticity, does not happen in a vacuum. It inevitably and profoundly impacts the people closest to you as you begin to live from the complex, messy, and creative truth of who you are. You can no longer participate in relationships based on simple roles or superficial pretenses. You bring your whole self to the table. And this newfound wholeness shines a brilliant light not only on your own inner world, but into the shared space between you and your loved ones. And in that light, you begin to see the intricate, often unconscious, dance of shadows that defines your most intimate connections as you step back into the world, grounded in your resilience and expressing your authentic, creative self. You bring this newfound wholeness into the most intense crucible of all your intimate relationships. It is here, in the sacred and often volatile space between you and a partner, that the most profound shadow work takes place. For when two people come together, they do not come alone. They each bring their own invisible entourage, their own cast of unhealed wounds, unmet needs, and exiled inner figures. A relationship is never just a partnership between two people. It is a complex and often unconscious negotiation between two shadows. The initial, intoxicating pull of romantic attraction is, in itself, an act of the shadow. We are often drawn to another person with an irresistible magnetic force precisely because they embody a missing piece of ourselves. Sometimes, they represent our golden shadow. We fall in love with their confidence, their freedom, their creativity, because we have disowned those very qualities in ourselves. They feel like a completion, a missing half. At other times, we are drawn to someone who is comfortable with a part of our dark shadow we have repressed. A highly controlled and responsible person may be inexplicably drawn to a wild, unpredictable spirit. An unconscious contract is formed. You will be the wild one for both of us, so I can remain the responsible one. For a time, this works. The projection holds. This is the magic of the honeymoon phase, where the other person seems to be the perfect answer to our own inner lack. But projections, by their nature, cannot last. Eventually, reality sets in, and the very qualities that once fascinated you about your partner may begin to grate on you. Their confidence now strikes you as arrogance. Their freedom now feels like a lack of commitment. Their wildness now seems reckless and immature. This is the critical turning point where most relationships begin to falter. But what is actually happening is that your own psyche is demanding that you take your projection back. It is telling you that it is time to develop your own confidence, find your own freedom, and integrate your own wildness. The friction you feel is a call to your own growth. This is where the shadow dance begins. It is the set of recurring, circular arguments that plague almost every long-term relationship. It feels like you are both reading from a hidden script, playing out the same painful scene over and over again. One person's shadow triggers the other's, which in turn triggers the first, in a seemingly endless and exhausting loop. To understand this dance, let us look at one of the most common patterns, the dynamic between a pursuer and a distancer. Imagine a couple, Anna and Mark. Anna is the pursuer. When she feels a disconnect, her anxiety rises, and she feels a deep need to talk, to process, to reconnect, to close the gap. Mark is the distancer. When he feels pressure or emotional intensity, he feels suffocated and overwhelmed, and his instinct is to retreat, to shut down, to create space. Their dance goes like this: Mark, feeling stressed from work, comes home and silently retreats into his own world. Anna senses the distance, and her shadow, which holds a deep fear of abandonment, is triggered. She begins to pursue him. What's wrong? Are you mad at me? We need to talk. Mark feels her anxious energy as an intrusion, a demand. His shadow, which holds a deep fear of being engulfed or controlled, is triggered. He retreats further, becoming more silent, maybe leaving the room. This, of course, sends Anna's fear of abandonment into overdrive. She pursues more frantically, perhaps with anger or tears. He defends himself by building a higher wall. Both go to bed feeling completely alone, unseen, and trapped in a painful caricature of themselves. What Anna and Mark don't realize is that they are not fighting about the present moment. They are caught in a waking dream, reenacting the unresolved wounds of their childhoods. Anna's pursuit stems from a past where she had to be a good girl to earn the attention of an inconsistent caregiver. Love, for her, feels conditional and precarious. Mark's distancing stems from a past where he had an intrusive or emotionally needy parent, and his only way to maintain a sense of self was to create an inner sanctuary of solitude. For him, intimacy is subconsciously linked to a loss of self. Her shadow screams. Don't abandon me, his shadow screams. Don't suffocate me. They are not enemies. They are two wounded people, whose wounds happen to press directly on each other's triggers with excruciating precision. This is the great tragedy and the sacred opportunity of intimate relationships. The person you love is almost guaranteed to be the person who will most powerfully trigger your deepest wounds. This is not a cosmic mistake. It is by divine design. Your relationship is a laboratory for your healing. The recurring conflicts are not a sign that the relationship is failing. They are a sign that the relationship is inviting you both to go deeper. The conflict is a precise, flashing arrow, pointing to exactly what needs to be healed in each of you. The thing that infuriates you most about your partner is almost always connected to a disowned part of yourself or an unhealed part of your past. To transform this dance from a toxic cycle into a path of mutual healing requires building a conscious relationship. This is a commitment to move from unconscious reaction to conscious partnership. It means that both partners agree to a new set of terms. First, if you each take 100% responsibility for your own reactions, regardless of what your partner does or says, your trigger is your responsibility. Second, you learn to use conflict as a tool for discovery. When the dance begins, one of you must have the courage to stop and ask a new set of questions. Instead of, "Why are you doing this to me?" you ask, "This is touching a deep fear in me. What is it touching in you?" You get curious about their wound, instead of just defending your own. Third, you vow to become the safe harbor for each other's healing. You create a space where the frightened child in your partner can finally be seen and heard, without judgment. This work is not easy. It requires humility, courage, and a love that is willing to choose growth over being right. But the reward is a level of intimacy you never dreamed possible. You stop being two people trying to get their own needs met, and you become a team dedicated to healing yourselves and each other. You move beyond the conditional love of the ego, which says, "I will love you if you meet my needs." And you enter the unconditional love of the soul, which says, "I see your wounds and my wounds, and I choose to love you through it all." As you do this work, as you trace the patterns of your relational dance back to their origins in your own childhood, a new question naturally arises. You see how your fear of abandonment was learned. You see how your partner's fear of engulfment was learned. And you begin to wonder, where did our parents learn their patterns? From whom did they inherit their shadows? You realize that this chain of pain and unconscious patterning did not begin with you. You are simply the current link in a long, ancestral chain, a carrier of emotional legacies passed down through generations. And this realization opens the door to an even deeper level of healing, the work with the ancestral shadow. As you stand in the sacred space of your intimate relationship, witnessing the dance of your shadow with your partners, you begin to trace the steps of that dance backwards in time. You see how your patterns were learned in the crucible of your own childhood. But the inquiry cannot stop there. A deeper question begins to echo in your soul. Where did my parents learn their dance and their parents before them? You lift your gaze from your own life and your own partnership, and you begin to see yourself as part of a vast, flowing river of generations. And you come to realize that you have inherited far more than the color of your eyes or the shape of your hands. You are the current carrier of an invisible emotional inheritance. a legacy of unresolved shadows passed down through your family line. This is not merely a poetic metaphor. The emerging science of epigenetics is now beginning to provide a biological basis for what ancient wisdom has always known: the experiences of our ancestors can become written into our very biology. Profound trauma, unspoken grief, and deep-seated fears can leave a chemical signature on our genes. A signature that can be passed down from one generation to the next. You may be living with the emotional ghosts of your ancestors. The free-floating anxiety you feel might not have its origins in your life, but in the terror your grandmother felt fleeing a war-torn country. The persistent, irrational belief that something terrible is about to happen might be the echo of a family that lived through famine or financial collapse. You are a link in a long chain, and the vibrations of the past are still humming through you. This ancestral shadow is composed of all the pain that was too much for your family system to process at the time. It is made of the family secrets, the suicide that was never spoken of, the child given up for adoption, the business that ended in a shameful bankruptcy. It is made of the unwritten and unspoken rules that governed your family's emotional life. Rules like, we don't talk about our feelings in this family. You must always be strong and never show weakness. Creative pursuits are frivolous and will lead to poverty. Or don't ever trust anyone outside the family. These rules and secrets create a kind of emotional atmosphere, a fog of anxiety, grief, scarcity, or stoicism that every member of the family breathes in, often without ever realizing it. To heal this, you must first become a genealogist of the soul. You must become a loving detective, investigating the emotional themes and recurring patterns that run through your family tree. Look at the patterns around money. Is there a story of chronic debt or a fearful hoarding of wealth? Look at the patterns in relationships. Is there a lineage of bitter divorces or of people who stayed in loveless marriages out of duty? Look for the recurring themes of addiction, of depression, of physical illness. What were the family's attitudes towards success? Was it celebrated? Or was there a subtle fear that if one person rose too high, something terrible would happen? What stories were told about your ancestors? And even more importantly, what stories were silenced? The gaps, the silences, the things everyone knows, but no one says that is where the family shadow resides. Let me tell you the story of a woman named Sarah. Sarah was successful in her career, but she lived with a private, crippling anxiety about money. It was an irrational fear of poverty that gnawed at her constantly. She was frugal to a fault, panicked over small, necessary expenses, and could never truly enjoy her success because she was haunted by a feeling of impending doom, a conviction that it could all be taken away in an instant. Her own upbringing had been modest but stable, so the intensity of her fear made no logical sense. As she began this work, she started asking her older relatives questions. She gently prodded into the family history, listening for the stories behind the silence. And she learned of her grandparents. They had been young farmers, full of hope, who lost everything in the Great Depression. They were cast into a state of profound poverty and shame, and the terror of that experience became branded onto their souls. They never spoke of it with their children. The shame was too great, but they didn't have to. They transmitted the feeling. They transmitted the anxiety, the constant low-grade panic, the worldview that the world is a fundamentally unsafe place where everything can be lost. This feeling was passed down to Sarah's father, and then to Sarah herself. It was the emotional wallpaper of her life. The great revelation for Sarah was that the suffocating financial anxiety she was experiencing was not entirely hers. She was carrying the unprocessed trauma of her grandparents. The ghost of the Great Depression was living in her nervous system. This realization did not magically cure her, but it fundamentally changed her work. Her anxiety was no longer a personal failing or a psychological defect. It was a sacred burden she had inherited, a legacy of pain that was asking, through her, for healing. This is where your personal work becomes an act of profound service. By committing to heal the ancestral shadow as it manifests in you. You become the chain breaker. You are the one who has the courage to finally feel the feelings your ancestors could not, to speak the truths they could not, and to create a new reality they could not. As Sarah learned to regulate her own nervous system, as she consciously practiced feeling safe and secure in her body, as she healed her own beliefs around scarcity and abundance, she was doing more than just helping herself. She was metabolizing her grandparents' trauma. She was bringing peace to the emotional ghosts in her lineage. She was, in a very real sense, healing the past. You have the opportunity to do the same by healing your own addiction. You are healing the line of addicts behind you by building a healthy, loving relationship. You are redeeming the loveless marriages of your ancestors by healing your own depression. You are offering a new possibility to a lineage that may have been steeped in despair. You become the one who says, "The buck stops here. This pain, this pattern, this suffering ends with me." It is a sacred responsibility and an incredible privilege. You become the ancestor that your descendants, born and unborn, will thank. And as you stand in this new awareness, as a healer of your own lineage, your perspective naturally expands one last time. You see how your family shadow was shaped by the larger community, by the country, by the historical events it endured. And you begin to wonder, if a family can have a shadow, can an entire culture have one? Can a nation, can all of humanity be carrying a collective inheritance of darkness? A shared shadow that influences our world in ways we can barely comprehend. This is the final and most expansive layer of the work, the confrontation with the collective shadow of the world. As you stand in the quiet clearing of your own healed lineage, you begin to feel the ground beneath your feet in a new way. You recognize that your family tree, with its unique shadows and legacies, did not grow in a vacuum. It grew in the soil of a particular culture, a specific nation, a distinct moment in human history. And just as an individual has a shadow, and a family has a shadow, so too does an entire society. We are all swimming in the invisible currents of the collective shadow, the vast, shared darkness of humanity itself. This is the final and most formidable frontier of our alchemical work. The collective shadow is composed of everything that a culture, a nation, or a society refuses to acknowledge about itself. It is the darkness that runs directly contrary to its cherished self-image. A nation that prides itself on being a land of liberty must therefore have a shadow that contains its history of slavery, of genocide, of oppression. A culture that defines itself as peaceful and enlightened must have a shadow that holds its capacity for violence, its history of brutal wars, and its hidden prejudices. It is the national hypocrisy, the societal cognitive dissonance, the chasm between the noble ideals we profess and the often brutal reality of our actions. Both past and present, this shadow does not simply vanish with time. It festers in the collective unconscious, waiting for an opportunity to erupt into our world. The primary way the collective shadow expresses itself is through the dark magic of mass scapegoating. It is the exact same mechanism of projection we see in individuals, but magnified to a terrifying societal scale. When a nation is facing difficult times, economic instability, social upheaval, a loss of identity or purpose, it becomes unbearable for the collective ego to face its own failings. It is far easier to locate the source of the problem in a specific, identifiable group. And so, the society projects its own disowned darkness, its fears, its insecurities, its greed, its own capacity for evil, onto a designated scapegoat. This group, often a minority, becomes the container for everything the dominant culture wishes to deny about itself. By hating them, persecuting them, or eliminating them, the society creates a temporary and toxic illusion of its own purity and righteousness. History is a tragic testament to this devastating process. The great witch hunts of Europe were a manifestation of a collective shadow, a patriarchal society, terrified of female power, instinct, and sexuality, projected this fear onto thousands of women, labeling them as evil and purging its own shadow at the stake. The Holocaust stands as the most horrific and well-documented example of the unchecked collective shadow in modern history. A German nation, crippled by the humiliation of war and economic collapse, projected its shadow onto the Jewish people, as well as other minorities, blaming them for every societal ill. This mass projection created a psychotic break from reality, a permission structure that allowed for unimaginable atrocities to be carried out by ordinary people who believed they were cleansing the world of evil, when in fact they were acting out the most evil parts of their own collective psyche. This is not just ancient history. This mechanism is alive and well today, amplified and accelerated by our 24-hour news cycle and the outrage engines of social media. Every day, we are invited to participate in collective shadow projection. Every news story that frames the world as a simple battle between us, the good, righteous people, and them, the evil, ignorant, immoral people, is an invitation to scapegoat. When you feel a surge of absolute, self-righteous rage at a political party, a different country, or another demographic, you must become incredibly curious. While your anger may be justified, its sheer, overwhelming intensity is often a sign that the event has activated not just your personal shadow, but the collective shadow as well. You are feeling the raw nerve of a shared, unhealed wound. The only way to begin healing the world is to stop participating in this mass projection. The world does not change when we become better at pointing out the shadow in others. The world changes when individuals have the courage to withdraw their own projections and take responsibility for the shadow within themselves and their own group. You cannot effectively fight racism in the world without first courageously facing the roots of prejudice and bias within your own heart. You cannot demand peace in the world without first ending the ceaseless war within your own mind. You cannot condemn the greed of corporations or governments without first examining your own relationship with consumption, scarcity, and desire. The work is always an inside job. This is the most potent form of activism there is. It is quiet. It is internal. And it is the most powerful force for change on the planet. Every time you choose understanding over judgment, you heal a piece of the world. Every time you show compassion to a part of yourself you once hated, you increase the compassion of the entire human family. Every time you have the courage to say, "I see that same darkness within me," you rob the collective shadow of its power to make you a puppet of hatred. You reduce the world's conflict by one person. You become an island of sanity in a sea of projection. Inner work is world work. As you commit to this path, as you diligently work to heal your personal shadow, your intimate shadows, and your ancestral shadows, a profound cleansing occurs. You are purifying your own energetic and psychological system from the inside out. Your conscious intentions are no longer being sabotaged by a lifetime of unconscious baggage. Your desires are no longer at war with your hidden fears and limiting beliefs. For the first time, your entire being, conscious, unconscious, personal, and ancestral, begins to align and move in the same direction. This state of deep inner alignment, this radical integrity of the soul, has an extraordinary side effect. It happens to be the missing ingredient, the secret key, to one of the most popular and often misunderstood spiritual concepts of our time. It is the master key that unlocks the door to your own creative power, your ability to consciously shape your reality. This deep, alchemical shadow work is the essential, missing link in the effective application of the law of attraction. After journeying through the deepest layers of the personal, relational, ancestral, and collective shadows, we arrive at a place of profound inner alignment. And it is from this place of wholeness that we can finally address one of the most alluring and often frustrating concepts in modern spirituality, the law of attraction. Perhaps you have tried it. Perhaps you have created vision boards, repeated affirmations, and spent hours visualizing your desires, only to be met with inconsistent results, fleeting successes, or deafening silence. The frustration you felt was real. But it was not because the law is false. It was because you were only given a fraction of the instruction manual. The deep, alchemical process of shadow work you have been undertaking is the missing foundational chapter. It is the crucial link that makes the entire law work. Not as a form of magical thinking, but as a predictable consequence of inner integrity. The popular understanding of the law of attraction is dangerously simplistic. It tells you to think positive and focus only on what you want. But this approach completely ignores the single most powerful force in your psyche, your unconscious mind. Think of yourself as an iceberg. The small tip visible above the water is your conscious mind, your wants, your desires, your affirmations. But the vast, massive, 95% of the iceberg that lies beneath the water is your unconscious. This is the realm of your deep-seated beliefs, your unresolved wounds, your family programming, and your entire personal shadow. You can try to steer the tip of the iceberg with all your might, but it is the immense mass and the deep ocean currents acting on the hidden part that will ultimately determine your direction. Positive thinking alone is like trying to change the course of an iceberg by yelling at the tip. Shadow work is the courageous act of diving into the cold, dark water to understand and align the entire submerged mass. The universe does not respond to what you want. It responds to who you are. It responds to the total frequency you are broadcasting. And the majority of that frequency is generated by the unconscious. When you try to practice the law of attraction without shadow work, you are sending out a chaotic and contradictory signal. Your conscious mind sends out a weak signal of, I want abundance, I am wealthy, but your shadow, holding a powerful, unexamined belief like, I am not worthy of success, or rich people are greedy and corrupt, or it's not safe to be visible, is broadcasting a much stronger, competing frequency of repel abundance. Stay small, stay safe. The universe, receiving this garbled, incoherent message, can only reflect that same incoherence back to you in the form of chaotic and frustrating life circumstances. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you unconsciously believe you are and deserve. Let me tell you the story of a man named David. David was a fervent believer in the law of attraction. He had a vision board covered in pictures of mansions and luxury cars. He listened to wealth affirmations every morning. He spent time every day visualizing himself as a millionaire. Yet, his life was a constant struggle with debt and financial insecurity. Opportunities would appear and then vanish. He would get close to a breakthrough, only to have it sabotaged by a freak accident or a poor decision. He was living in a state of profound frustration, feeling like the universe was dangling a carrot he could never quite reach. Finally, exhausted, he turned his focus inward. He began the process of shadow work. He started to examine his intense emotional reactions around money. He noticed a feeling of disgust and self-righteousness whenever he saw someone flaunting extreme wealth. He began to dialogue with this part of himself. In his active imagination, he discovered a grim, hard-working ancestor figure, a farmer with calloused hands, who sneered at the soft, corrupt city folk. He dug into his family history and realized he came from a long line of people who took pride in their honest poverty and held a deep-seated resentment and distrust for the wealthy. They had a core belief system that equated piety and goodness with financial struggle. The revelation struck him like a lightning bolt. His conscious mind was desperately trying to attract wealth. But his powerful, loyal shadow self, steeped in generations of ancestral programming, was desperately trying to protect him from becoming one of those people, the greedy, immoral, unlovable rich. His unconscious was a loyal soldier. faithfully, executing an old program, repel wealth, to ensure you remain a good person and stay connected to the tribe. His self-sabotage was not a flaw. It was a misguided act of love and loyalty to his ancestors. With this awareness, the real work could begin. He didn't banish the ancestor figure. He used compassion. He thanked that part of him for trying to protect his integrity. He then consciously began to dismantle the old belief and install a new, integrated one. I can be a person of immense integrity, generosity, and goodness, and also a person of immense wealth. My prosperity can be a force for good in the world. He wasn't just pasting a new thought on top of an old one. He had gone into the engine room and fundamentally rewired his beliefs at the unconscious level. His inner conflict ceased. His frequency became clear, whole, and coherent, and soon after, his external reality began to shift in profound and lasting ways. This is the true alchemy. Shadow work clears out the two primary blocks to all forms of manifestation: the belief that I am not worthy of receiving it, and the fear that it is not safe for me to have it. Almost all of us hold a shadow fear of success. We fear the visibility, the responsibility, the criticism, and the potential jealousy from others that can come with getting everything we want. By facing these fears, by embracing the parts of ourselves that feel unworthy, we heal the very wounds that have been pushing our desires away. When you do this deep work, manifestation ceases to be a struggle. It is no longer an act of desperate trying. It becomes a natural consequence of your own inner wholeness. You become a clear vessel, an aligned magnet, and the people, resources, and opportunities that match your new, coherent frequency are drawn to you effortlessly. And as your inner world becomes less noisy, less filled with the static of internal conflict, you begin to notice something magical. You become incredibly sensitive to the subtle ways the universe communicates with you. You start to see the patterns, the signs, the meaningful coincidences that were there all along, guiding you. You enter the world of synchronicity as you walk through the world in this new state of inner alignment. With the war between your conscious desires and your unconscious beliefs now over, your entire being becomes a finely tuned instrument. The inner static of conflict has been silenced. And in this newfound quiet, you begin to hear the subtle music that the universe has been playing all along. You start to notice a secret dialogue that is constantly unfolding between your inner world and the outer world. This is the realm of synchronicity. Synchronicity is the term the great psychologist Carl Jung coined for a meaningful coincidence. It is the experience of an external event that has no direct causal relationship to your inner state, yet feels so perfectly and meaningfully aligned with it that it could not possibly be random. It is the universe winking at you. It is a moment where the seemingly separate worlds of mind and matter, of psyche and reality, rhyme in perfect, startling harmony. It is thinking of a long-lost friend for the first time in years, only to have them call you that very afternoon. It is wrestling with a specific life question, and then having a book literally fall off a shelf in a bookstore, opening to a page that contains your answer. It is seeing the same sequence of numbers, the same animal, or the same symbol, over and over again during a period of intense personal transformation. These are not mere coincidences. They are cosmic breadcrumbs, left along your path to let you know that you are seen, that you are heard, and that you are moving in alignment with a larger intelligence. They are moments of grace that confirm you are on the right track. Moments that break through the veil of ordinary reality and reveal the magical, interconnected tapestry that lies just beneath the surface of things. The story of how Jung himself came to define this concept is perhaps the most perfect illustration of its power. He was treating a patient who was a brilliant woman, but deeply entrenched in a rational, linear worldview that made her resistant to the deeper, more symbolic work of the unconscious. Her therapy had stalled. One day, she was describing a powerful dream she'd had the night before. In the dream, Someone had given her a priceless piece of jewelry in the shape of a golden scarab beetle. As she was passionately describing the details of this dream, Jung heard a gentle tapping sound against his office window. He turned and saw a flying insect knocking against the outer pane. He opened the window, caught the creature as it flew in, and turned back to his patient. He opened his hand. In it was a scarabide beetle, a common rose chafer, whose golden-green coloring was the closest natural analogy to a golden scarab he could have hoped to find in his part of the world. "Here," he said to her, "is your scarab." The experience was so impossible, so perfectly timed, so utterly beyond the laws of chance, that it shattered the woman's rigid rationalism. It was the breakthrough she needed. A direct, undeniable experience of the mysterious connection between her inner world and the outer world. This is synchronicity in its most classic form, an event that provides the precise experience needed at the precise moment it is needed to facilitate healing and growth. But synchronicity is not always so gentle or beautiful. It does not only arrive to confirm our progress with golden beetles. The universe also uses synchronicity to get our attention when we are refusing to look at our shadow. In these instances, synchronicity can feel less like a gentle wink and more like being repeatedly hit over the head with a cosmic 2x4. Do you find yourself attracting the same kind of emotionally unavailable partner over and over again? Do you seem to land in job after job with the same kind of tyrannical boss? Do you repeatedly find yourself in friendships that end in a similar pattern of betrayal? This is not just bad luck. This is a synchronistic pattern. The universe, in its deep wisdom, is repeatedly sending you a mirror. It is bringing you external situations that perfectly reflect an unhealed internal wound or a disowned part of your shadow. And it will continue to do so with increasing intensity, until you finally stop blaming the mirror and turn to look at your own face. The woman who only attracts unavailable men is being invited to look at her own emotional unavailability, a pattern she likely learned as a defense mechanism in childhood. The man who always has a tyrannical boss is being invited to look at his own disowned power and his relationship with authority. These painful, recurring life patterns are urgent messages from the universe, orchestrated by your own soul, begging you to pay attention to a specific aspect of your shadow that is ripe for integration. So how do you cultivate this awareness? How do you learn to read this secret language? The key is not to make synchronicity happen, but to create the inner conditions that allow you to notice that it is happening all the time. First, you must practice presence. You cannot read the signs if your head is buried in your phone, or if your mind is constantly lost in worries about the future or regrets about the past. By being here, now, you open your senses to the world around you. Second, you must cultivate curiosity. Approach your life not as a series of random, meaningless events, but as a great, mysterious novelle, filled with clues, symbols, and foreshadowing. See everything as potentially significant. And finally, it is immensely helpful to keep a synchronicity journal. When one of these meaningful coincidences occurs, write it down. Note the outer event and the inner state you were in at the time. What were you thinking about? What problem were you wrestling with? This act of recording does two things. It honors the message, signaling to the universe that you are listening, and it trains your pattern recognition mind to see connections you might have otherwise missed. Over time, you will see that your life is not a random sequence of events at all, but a rich and intricate dialogue between you and a living, responsive cosmos. When you begin to live this way, when you see that everything happening in your life, both the delightful and the difficult, is part of a meaningful conversation designed for your ultimate growth, your entire worldview shifts. You are no longer a passive victim, tossed about by the random waves of fate. You are no longer a helpless subject of a cold and indifferent universe. You become an active, engaged, and empowered participant in a grand, co-creative dance. This is the great alchemical transformation of consciousness itself, the profound and final shift from being the victim of your story to becoming the alchemist of your life. When you begin to live in the magical flow of synchronicity, seeing your life not as a series of accidents, but as a meaningful dialogue with the cosmos, something fundamental within you fractures. The old identity, the old way of seeing yourself in the world, can no longer hold. A crack runs through the very foundation of your worldview, and through that crack, a new light pours in. This is the moment of the great shift, the most significant transformation of consciousness you will ever undertake. It is the sacred, alchemical transmutation from the victim of your life to the alchemist of your life. For most of your journey, you have likely lived, as most of humanity does, from the perspective of the victim. This is not a judgment, it is a description of a default state of consciousness. The victim's mantra, spoken or unspoken, is life happens to me. From this viewpoint, the world is a series of external events and circumstances that impact you. Power is located outside of yourself. You are happy when good things happen to you. You are sad or angry when bad things happen to you. Your life is a story of what others did, of the hands you were dealt, of the circumstances you were forced to endure. The shadow, from this perspective, is a curse. It is the source of your bad luck, your flaws, your wounds. It is a heavy weight you are forced to carry, a source of endless suffering you wish would just go away. The alchemist, however, operates from a profoundly different paradigm. The alchemist does not deny the pain or injustice of the world. They feel it fully, but they ask a different set of questions. They look at a challenge, and instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they ask, "Why is this happening for me?" This single one-word change is the pivot upon which your entire reality turns. For me, amply purpose. It implies a lesson. It implies that the universe is not your antagonist, but your teacher. Every trigger, every challenge, every heartbreak, every dark night of the soul is seen not as a random punishment, but as a custom-designed lesson plan, delivered by a benevolent intelligence. For the sole purpose of your evolution, the shadow is no longer a curse, it is the prima materia, the sacred raw material that has been given to you to conduct your great work of transformation. This shift is cemented by a sacred and unwavering vow. It is the vow of 100% responsibility. Now, this is a dangerous and often misunderstood concept. This is not about blaming yourself for external events. It is not your fault that you were born into a difficult family. It is not your fault that you experienced trauma. It is not your fault that the storm came and damaged your home. But the alchemist understands that while they are not responsible for the event itself, they are 100% responsible for their response to the event. They take absolute ownership of their feelings, their stories, their reactions, and their choices. They realize that their true power does not lie in controlling the chaotic world outside, but in mastering the rich and fertile world within. You are not responsible for the hand you were dealt, but you are entirely responsible for how you play your cards. This is the ultimate reclamation of power. There is a beautiful parable that perfectly illustrates this alchemical transformation. It is the story of the oyster and the pearl. An oyster lives its quiet life in the sea, its inner world soft, vulnerable, and protected by a hard outer shell. One day, a foreign body, an irritating grain of sand, invades its sanctuary. It slips past the shell and lodges itself in the oyster's tender flesh. This is the trigger, the wound, the unwelcome piece of shadow. The oyster has a choice. The victim response would be to become inflamed, to fester, to allow the constant irritation to poison its system until it weakens and dies. This is what we do when we allow our wounds to define us. When we endlessly replay our grievances and nurse our pain without transforming it. But the alchemist oyster does something miraculous. It accepts the presence of the irritant. It does not reject it. Instead, it begins to surround it, to coat it with its own precious essence. It secretes a luminous, healing substance called nacre, and it wraps the source of its pain in layer after layer of this shimmering beauty. It embraces the wound. It transforms the intruder into a part of itself, and over time, the source of its greatest suffering becomes the nucleus of its greatest creation. The irritating grain of sand is transformed into a lustrous, perfect pearl. The wound has become the source of its beauty. This is what you are learning to do. Every trigger, every shadow aspect, every painful memory is a grain of sand. Your work is to stop being irritated by it and to start coating it with the nacre of your own compassion, your awareness, your courage. You are not trying to get rid of the pain. You are transforming it into power. You are creating a pearl from your wound. In fact, if you look back at your life, you will see that your greatest points of pain have almost always become your greatest sources of strength and purpose. The experience of abandonment can become the wellspring of your profound capacity for empathy. The experience of betrayal can become the foundation of your unshakable integrity. The experience of hitting rock bottom can become the launching pad for your most authentic life. Your deepest wounds contain the seeds of your most sacred gifts. This is the shift from life happens for me to the final, a most empowered state of consciousness. Life happens through me. You realize that you are not just a student learning from the universe. You are a partner with the universe. You are a channel, a vessel through which the creative intelligence of the cosmos can express itself. The pearl you create from your pain is not just for you. It is your unique gift to the world. Your story of healing becomes a beacon for others. Your wisdom, forged in the fires of your own shadow, becomes the medicine that can heal your community. This alchemical process is not a one-time event. You do not simply become an alchemist and then graduate. It is a new way of living, a new orientation to every moment of your life. It is an ongoing art form. And this new, empowered way of being is the engine that allows you to consciously participate in the higher and more refined stages of the great alchemical work. You have mastered the nigredo, the blackening. Now, with your power reclaimed, you are ready for the washing, the whitening, the emergence into a new clarity and a new life. Having reclaimed your power and stepped into the identity of the alchemist, you are no longer defined by the darkness and chaos of the initial stage. The nigredo, the blackening, was a necessary and profound descent, but it was never the destination. It was the purification by fire. And what emerges from that fire is something refined, luminous, and new. You now enter the subsequent, higher stages of the great work, beginning with the phase known as the albedo. Albedo is the whitening. It is the dawn that breaks after the longest, darkest night of the soul. It is the washing of the ashes, the cleansing of the prima materia after it has been burned clean in the crucible of the nigredo. Imagine the feeling of a cool, clean rain after a season of smoke and fire. Imagine the quiet that descends after a violent storm has passed. This is the feeling of albedo. It is a state of profound clarity, stillness, and peace. The inner war is over. The emotional turmoil has ceased, and you are left with the simple, luminous truth of your own essential nature. Psychologically, the albedo is the fruit of having faced and integrated your shadow. Because you have withdrawn your projections from the world, you are now able to see yourself, other people, and reality itself with crystal clarity. You see things as they are, not as your wounds and fears once distorted them to be. The emotional buttons that used to send you into a tailspin are no longer active, because the original wound underneath has been cleaned and healed. You can navigate situations that once would have triggered you with a sense of calm detachment. There is a coolness to this state, a pristine quality like freshly fallen snow. It is the state of the witness, the observer, who can watch the drama of life unfold without being pulled into it. In the language of the hero's journey, the nigredo was the descent into the underworld, the belly of the whale. The albedo is the moment the hero, having slain the dragon, finally finds the treasure. It is the discovery of the elixir, the attainment of the secret knowledge, the Holy Grail. It is a moment of quiet, profound, and solitary revelation. A sense of purity and spiritual detachment pervades, and there can be a great temptation to remain in this state. It feels so peaceful, so clean. Compared to the messy, complicated world of human affairs, there is a desire to become the hermit on the mountaintop, forever contemplating the silver light of the moon, far from the chaotic marketplace below. But this serene state of being, while a necessary and beautiful stage of healing, is not the final goal for a human being destined to live a full and embodied life. The treasure is not meant to be hoarded in the cave. The final stage of the great work is called the rubedo. It is the reddening, if albedo was the cool, silver light of the moon and the dawn. Rubedo is the warm rantag, golden red light of the rising sun. It is the return of blood, of passion, of life force, into the purified vessel of the soul. It is the stage where the alchemist, having perfected the work in the laboratory, brings their creation out into the world. It is the marriage of the cool, transcendent clarity you gained in albedo with the messy, vibrant, unpredictable reality of earthly life. Rubedo is the stage of re-engagement. But on a completely new level, you bring your enlightened consciousness back into your relationships, your career, your community. You learn to be the hermit on the inside while being a full participant in the marketplace on the outside. You can hold a deep, unshakable inner peace while navigating a traffic jam. You can feel a profound connection to the cosmos while doing your taxes. The separation between the spiritual and the mundane dissolves. Everything becomes an opportunity for practice, for expression, for living your truth. This is the legendary union of opposites, the marriage of heaven and earth, of spirit and matter, right in the center of your own heart. The state of rubedo is characterized by a steady, passionate, and joyful vitality. It is not the manic, searching energy of the unhealed ego. It is a calm, confident, and generative life force. You act in the world from a place of purpose and integrity. Your actions are aligned with your soul's deepest calling. You are no longer driven by the need for approval or the fear of rejection. You are fueled by an authentic desire to contribute, to create, and to love. This is the completion of the hero's journey. Rubedo is the return. The hero, having found the elixir in the underworld, does not remain there. They undertake the journey back to their village, back to the ordinary world, and they share the treasure. They use the elixir to heal the community. The wisdom gained in solitude finds its ultimate meaning in service to the whole. This is the ultimate goal of the alchemical path. Not to escape the world, but to become a living, breathing philosopher's stone that can transform the lead of ordinary experience into the gold of meaning, love, and purpose, both for yourself and for others. You become a beacon. Your very presence begins to have an effect on the people around you, because you are living proof that transformation is possible. When you have moved through a full cycle of this great work, from the darkness and dissolution of nigredo, to the clarity and purification of albedo, to the passionate re-engagement of rubedo, your entire way of being has been fundamentally reforged. The process is no longer a separate activity you do. It is not something you schedule in your calendar. The work has become fully integrated into the fabric of your life. You are no longer a person who is doing shadow work. You are a person who has integrated their shadow. And this leads to a new and final state of being, the art of living a whole life. Having journeyed through the fire of nigredo, the dawn of albedo, and the vibrant life of rubedo, you arrive not at a final destination, but at a new way of being. The frantic work of excavation and forging begins to subside. And what is left is the ongoing, living art of integration. This is the quiet, sustained practice of living a whole life. It is the state where the war of opposites within you has ceased. Not because one side has won, but because both sides have been honored, embraced, and woven together into a single, beautiful tapestry. The first and most liberating truth of an integrated life is that wholeness is not perfection. From the very beginning of your journey, you may have been driven by a hidden desire to become a perfect version of yourself, a version that is always calm, always loving, always strong, always enlightened. You sought to vanquish your shadow, to eliminate your flaws, to finally arrive at a flawless state of being. Integration is the final, compassionate surrender of that impossible quest. Perfection implies cutting pieces away. Wholeness implies bringing all the pieces home. It is the courage to be fully, gloriously, and messily human. It is the acceptance that you are, and always will be, a living paradox. You are both saint and sinner, sage and fool, spirit and animal. And in the embrace of this paradox, you find a peace that perfection could never offer. The most tangible result of this is the end of inner fragmentation. For most of your life, you were likely a collection of different selves. There was the work self, the family self, the social self, and the secret, hidden in the self. Each had its own set of rules, its own mask, its own way of being. The energy it took to maintain these separate personas and to manage the conflicts between them was immense. Integration is the process of these selves merging into one. Your actions, your words, and your deepest beliefs begin to align. There is a congruence, a transparency to your being. The person you are in private is the same person you are in public. This doesn't mean you share everything with everyone, but it means the core of who you are remains consistent. This integrity ends the chronic, low-grade civil war within your psyche, freeing up that energy for a life of presence and purpose. A beautiful and surprising quality that emerges from this state is a sense of spiritual humor. When you are no longer desperately trying to uphold a perfect image of yourself, you can begin to see the inherent comedy in your own humanity. You can catch yourself in a moment of ego, or see a flicker of an old shadow pattern rising up. And instead of spiraling into shame or self-judgment, you can meet it with a gentle, knowing smile. It is the loving chuckle of the wise parent watching a child stumble. You can laugh with yourself, not at yourself. This humor is a sign of profound integration. It shows that you have detached from the tyranny of your ego. You can see its antics, its fears, its absurdities, and you can love it all without being controlled by it. You learn to not take yourself so seriously, because you have touched a part of yourself that is far deeper and more real than the fluctuating personality. The central image for this integrated state is the ancient Taoist symbol of the yin-yang. Look at this symbol in your mind's eye. It is a perfect circle, filled with two swirling teardrop shapes. One black yin, one white yang. They are not at war. They are not in conflict. They are in a perpetual, flowing, and graceful dance. Each gives rise to the other. Each flows seamlessly into its opposite. They are not two separate things. They are two aspects of a single, unified whole. Life itself is this dance. There is a time for action, yang, and a time for receptivity, yin. A time for speaking, yang, and a time for listening, yin. A time for effort, yang, and a time for rest, yin. The unintegrated person fights this rhythm. They try to be always active, always strong, always in the light. They resist the natural pull toward rest, surrender, and the darkness of the unknown. They are fighting the fundamental current of life. The integrated person learns to dance. They stop fighting the river and learn to flow with it. They develop an intuitive sense of when to push and when to yield. But the deepest wisdom of the yin-yang symbol lies in the small dots at the center of each swirl. Within the largest area of the white-yang, there is a small dot of black. And within the largest area of the black-yin, there is a small dot of white. This teaches us the most profound truth of wholeness. Nothing is pure. Everything contains the seed of its opposite. In your greatest strength, there is a seed of vulnerability. In your moments of deepest surrender, you will find a seed of unshakable power. In your most radiant joy, there is a memory of sorrow that gives it depth. In your deepest grief, there is a seed of future joy that allows you to endure. To live an integrated life is to embody this principle. It is to be a leader who is not afraid to say, "I don't know." It is to be a healer who is not afraid to admit their own wounds. It is to be a spiritual person who is not afraid to be earthly and sensual. You have access to the full spectrum of your humanity, and you are no longer afraid to use it. You are a bridge between worlds, holding the tension of the opposites within your own heart. And in doing so, you find a dynamic, resilient, and ever-evolving balance. And as you live in this state of wholeness, as you practice this art of a balanced life, one final question may begin to surface in the quiet moments. You have done the great work. You have faced the darkness, embraced the light, and integrated the two. You have transformed the lead of your suffering into the gold of wisdom. But what if the ultimate goal of alchemy was never really to create the gold? What if the entire Aldous beautiful journey was designed for one final, stunning realization? What if the point was simply to burn away everything that was not gold, so that you could finally recognize the substance you were made of all along? We stand now at the threshold of the final understanding, the ultimate revelation toward which this entire alchemical journey has been leading. We have traveled through the deepest shadows of the self, the couple, the family, and the world. We have learned to transmute pain into power and darkness into light. And now, we must ask the final question that was posed at the end of our last chapter. What if the goal of this great work was never to create the gold? What if the entire Aldous and beautiful process was designed simply to help you see what you were made of all along? This is the ultimate truth, the final secret of alchemy that dissolves the alchemist, the laboratory, and the work itself into a single, luminous reality. You are, and have always been, the gold. The entire journey, the quest for healing, the search for wholeness, was a sacred and necessary illusion. It was a skillful means, a divine game created by your own soul to wear down the resistance of the ego. The ego is the part of you that believes it is separate, that it is flawed, that it is broken, and that it must do something, achieve something, or attain something in order to be worthy of love and peace. And so, the soul conspires to give the ego a grand and noble task. It gives it the quest of alchemy, the great work of turning lead into gold. The ego, loving a challenge, takes up this work with fervor. It diligently faces the triggers, descends into the darkness, learns compassion, dialogues with demons, and decodes its dreams. And in this process, in the heat of this sacred work, the ego itself begins to soften, to dissolve, to see through its own illusion of separateness. The journey was never about arriving at a destination. The journey was the medicine designed to cure you of the belief that you were ever anywhere but home. You were the alchemist, but you were also the laboratory, and you were also the raw material. The entire universe of this transformation was contained within the boundless space of your own consciousness. With this understanding, you look back at your shadow with new eyes. It was never a mistake in your design. It was never a flaw to be corrected or a disease to be cured. Your shadow, your anger, your fear, your shame, your grief was an essential and perfect part of your wholeness. The darkness was necessary to define the light. The depths were necessary to give meaning to the heights. The lead was never a different substance from the gold. It was simply the gold in its densest, most unrecognized form. Your so-called flaws were the very texture and richness that make you a complete human being. You were never broken. You were simply unfinished in your own understanding. This realization transforms your search for everything you have ever wanted. Think of the peace, the love, the abundance you have been seeking. You believed these were rewards waiting for you at the end of the journey. Prizes you would receive once you had finally vanquished your shadow and become good enough. This is the final illusion to fall. Peace is not the prize you win when the inner war is over. Peace is the state of being that arises when you simply stop fighting the war. It was here all along, buried under the conflict. Love is not something you finally become worthy of receiving. Love is the natural state that flourishes when you practice total, radical self-acceptance of every part of you, both light and dark. Abundance is not a treasure you find outside of yourself. It is the natural flow of the universe through you, which occurs effortlessly when you have healed the shadow beliefs of unworthiness and scarcity that were blocking the flow. These are not things you achieve. They are the things you uncover when you remove what was obscuring them. They are your birthright. There is an old story of a great alchemist who spent his entire long life in search of the philosopher's stone, the legendary substance that could turn any metal to gold and grant eternal life. His laboratory was filled with the relics of 1,000 failed experiments. His hands were stained and scarred. His face was a map of every hope and every despair he had ever felt. He was old now, his body frail, and he knew his life was ending. He had failed. He had never found the stone. As he sat in his chair for the last time, a profound and peaceful clarity descended upon him. He looked at his life's work, not with the bitterness of failure, but with a new sense of wonder. He looked at his hands and realized they held the wisdom of 1,000 substances. He looked at his mind and realized it had become as sharp and as subtle as any instrument in his laboratory, capable of holding the most profound paradoxes. He looked at his heart and saw that it had been forged in the fires of devotion, softened by compassion for his own failures, and made resilient by his unwavering commitment to the quest. And in that final, luminous moment, he understood. The philosopher's stone was not an object to be found. It was a process to be lived. The true alchemy was not the transformation of the metals in his crucibles. It was the transformation of his own consciousness through the work, his dedication, his focus, his resilience, his wisdom, his passion, his journey. That was the stone. That was the gold. He did not need to find it, for in his very seeking, he had become it. This is the final realization for you. On your journey, the long and often difficult path you have walked was the very process that has allowed you to see the truth that was always present. You are not the person who needed healing. You are the eternal awareness that held that person with compassion as they healed. You are not the lead that needed to be transformed. You are the indestructible, precious, and shining gold that was merely obscured by the illusion of being led. All the work was simply to help you remember the truth of who you are. So breathe into this final, simple, and profound truth. You are the alchemist. You are the stone. You are the treasure you were seeking. You are the gold, and the journey from here is not one of striving, but of shining. It is the end of our exploration, but the true beginning of your embodiment. We arrive, at long last, at the summit of the mountain, the center of the labyrinth, the final chamber of the heart. The entire journey, every painful trigger, every dark night, every tender act of compassion, every startling synchronicity has led to this single, precipitous moment of understanding. We have carried the question. What if the goal was never to create the gold, but to realize we were made of it all along? Now, we must let the question dissolve, for in its place, a truth of breathtaking simplicity and power can finally dawn. The entire alchemical journey was a sacred and elaborate game of hide and seek. You were playing with your own divine nature. And the game is now over. The seeker has found itself. From the beginning, you have been operating under the assumption that you were a flawed human being on a journey to become whole. You believed you were a leaden self, striving to become golden. This is the fundamental illusion, the divine amnesia, that initiated your very existence as a separate individual. For the boundless, unified consciousness of the universe to experience itself. For God to know God, it had to pretend. It had to put on the costume of you, a being who had forgotten its own infinite nature. It gave itself the gift of limitation, the adventure of a finite life, so it could have the joy of remembering. The entire world, with all its challenges and shadows, was the beautiful and ingenious playground it created for this game of remembrance. Your shadow was never a punishment or a flaw. It was the necessary architecture of the game. It was the friction required to create the fire of awareness. It was the perceived separation that would make the eventual reunion so sweet. Think of it this way. Without the shadow of hunger, there could be no pleasure in being fed. Without the shadow of silence, there could be no beauty in music. Without the shadow of loneliness, there could be no profound joy in connection. Your shadow was the exquisite contrast, the dark velvet upon which the diamond of your true nature could finally be seen. You were never broken. You were simply a master artist, painting a masterpiece, who had intentionally limited your palette so you could experience the thrill of discovering the missing colors. One by one, the process of integrating your shadow was not about fixing a flawed creation. It was the act of remembering where you yourself had put the rest of the paints. This realization must now ripple backwards through everything you thought you were trying to achieve. The peace you sought was not an end state to be won after the war with your shadow was over. Peace is the fundamental silence of your own being, the stillness that was always present underneath the noise of the inner conflict. You were taught to entertain. The love you craved was not a prize to be earned by becoming worthy. Love is the very fabric of the universe, the connective tissue that binds all things, which you can only feel when you stop telling the story that you are separate and unlovable. The abundance you desired was not a reward for your hard work. Abundance is the nature of reality itself, an infinite wellspring from which you were cut off only by the shadow belief that you were living in a world of lack and limitation. These qualities are not things you acquire. They are what you are made of. The entire journey was designed to help you remove the perceptual filters that convinced you they were anywhere but right here, right now, at the very core of your being. Let us use one final metaphor. Imagine a star. It is born from a vast, diffuse cloud of cosmic dust and gas, simple, rough material, for billions of years. The core of this star is a crucible of unimaginable pressure and relentless heat. In this furnace, under this immense struggle, it performs the true alchemy of the cosmos. It fuses simple elements into more complex ones. It lives its entire life in a state of constant, fiery, and creative tension. And through this process, as a natural expression of its being, it radiates light, heat, and life into the void. It does not try to shine. The shining is the inevitable result of the intense process at its core. In its final moments, it may explode in a brilliant supernova, seeding the universe with the heaviest and most precious elements it has forged, including gold. The star's purpose was never to find light or to attain gold. Its purpose was to be a star. Its very nature was to generate light and forge gold through the crucible of its own existence. The pressure was not a punishment. It was the engine of its glory. The fiery transformation was not a flaw. It was its authentic nature in action. You are that star. Your life, with all its pressures and all its heat, is the crucible, the shadow work, the challenges, the heartbreaks that is the sacred process of fusion happening at your very core. The love, the wisdom, the compassion, the resilience you now feel, that is the light you are radiating as a natural consequence of your own authentic process. You were never a human being searching for the gold. You are a divine, cosmic engine whose very nature is to forge gold from the raw material of your own life. You were not looking for the light. You are the light. Let this understanding settle into your bones. The search is over. Because the seeker was an illusion. The lead was an illusion. The separation was an illusion. There is no alchemist and no raw material. There is only the gold. Finally recognizing itself, there is only the star. Finally recognizing that its entire existence is an act of shining. This is the final resting place of the mind. The great peace that passes all understanding. The work is finished. Not because you have become perfect, but because you have finally realized you were already whole. And so, we leave the laboratory behind. We put down the tools of the quest. The journey of becoming is complete. And now, a new journey can begin, the simple, joyful, and ever-unfolding journey of just being. We have journeyed together into the deepest and most shadowed landscapes of the human soul. We began with the unsettling feeling of being a stranger in our own house. Haunted by impulses and emotions we did not understand. We learned to see our own hidden faces in the mirrors of the world. Recognizing our disowned parts in the people who triggered us most, we bravely chose to descend into the alchemical negredo, the dark night where the false self is dissolved. And we discovered the surprising power of compassion as the only light that burns in that darkness. We learned to dialogue with our inner demons, only to find they were wounded guardians. We learned to read the symbolic language of our dreams, only to find they were letters from a wiser self. We unearthed not just our pain, but our power. Discovering the golden shadow of our exiled magnificence, we saw how this integration forges an unshakable resilience, giving us the courage to be disliked, to live authentically, and to unlock the wellspring of creativity that flows from a whole heart. We have followed this thread through the intricate dance of our relationships, back through the long chain of our ancestors, and out into the vast, collective shadow of the world itself. We have seen how all of this inner work is the missing link to true manifestation, and how it opens our eyes to the magical dialogue of synchronicity. We have walked the full path, from the victim of circumstance to the alchemist of our own reality. If there is one central truth to take from this entire journey, let it be this: your darkness is not a mistake in your design. It is a feature of your divinity. The shadow is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be embraced. The ultimate goal was never to become a flawless, perfected version of yourself, but to have the courage to become a complete and integrated one. True peace is not the trophy you are given for winning the brutal war against your own nature. It is the quiet that descends upon the battlefield when you are finally brave enough to declare a ceasefire and welcome all parts of yourself home. You are no longer lost. You are no longer a victim of the mysterious forces moving within you. You now hold a map to your own inner world, and you possess the tools of transformation. You have the soft light of compassion to guide you, the sharp sword of awareness to see clearly, and the brave heart of the alchemist, who knows that nothing is to be discarded. You understand that your deepest wounds are the very source of your greatest gifts, that the irritating grain of sand becomes the pearl, that the lead is the promise of the gold. So now, you stand at the true beginning. The exploration is over, but the art of living has just begun. Look at your life, at your pain, at your fear, at your shame. Do not curse it. Do not run from it. It is your prima materia, your sacred inheritance, the raw material for your great work. Take it into the crucible of your loving awareness. Apply the steady fire of your consciousness, and do what you were born to do. Transform it. You are the alchemist of your own soul. What was once toxic lead can now become your most precious gold. Your life awaits its master. Begin.